Welcome to the U3 Media Podcast, where our mission is to unite the world through coffee. I'm Christy Ross, and joining us today is Jen Apodaca, founder of Mother Tongue. Welcome, Jen. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to set the stage for you. You have been a longtime specialty roaster for top brands and importers. You now run your own roasting company and opened your first cafe this year, so you've been very busy. You are one of the most well-known women roasters in the US and beyond. You sort of made the leap from that security of working for someone else to start your own roasting company. So what was the tipping point for that decision?
Yeah, when I first got interested in roasting coffee, the original plan was to always start my own business. And I had like a little chunk of money, and I had just recently moved. I'm from the Bay Area, and I'd moved to Portland, Oregon. And I was like, I've got to do something for myself. I'm gonna start roasting coffee. I had traveled recently before that, so I took some like small business classes, and coffee in particular really struck a chord with me. And so I was trying to figure out how to start my own roasting company. And at that time, it was a long time ago. I've been doing this for a long time. So it was like 2004, 2003. And at that time, everyone was very secretive, lots of secret recipes, not a lot of collaboration. And it was just a really uphill battle to try and figure out how to get into roasting specifically. And it was also very expensive. It's very cost prohibitive. The roasting machines are extremely expensive. There's no such thing as shared roasting spaces like people kind of can have the opportunity to use today. So I decided to just get a job as I was just working at this restaurant, and they posted an internal post for a roaster assistant, and I got the job, which was really crazy. So it kind of happened serendipitously. It's really hard to get a job as a roaster, to be honest.
Yeah, that's sort of what I've heard. And if I look back, like the places that you've worked for some of the biggest names in coffee, like Intelligentsia and Blue Bottle. And I also saw that you worked as a director of roasting at, was it Crown Royal Coffee Center?
Yeah, it's for Royal Coffee, who's a green coffee importer, and they opened up sort of an educational space as well as like a cafe, and that's called the Crown. I think it's called the tasting room, and so they teach classes and stuff like that. And I was their director of roasting for 3 years.
So is that the place that you got your first roasting job, or you said it was at a restaurant, so it was it was different from that, right?
Exactly. So my first roasting gig, it was probably barely considered specialty coffee by some. That was at McMenamins, who is in Portland. They're in Portland, Oregon. So they have like over 60 locations throughout the Pacific Northwest. They've got movie theaters, and they've got hotels, and they've got burger joints, and they make their own beer, and they distill their own whiskey and liquor, and they make their own wine, and they also roast their own coffee. So I worked for them for like 5 years, actually, and I really learned a lot. I learned how to repair machines. I had my first roaster fire there. Everyone has one.
Like
You're not a real roaster until you have a fire.
Exactly. I feel like that anoints you into like being an official roaster.
Yes, anointed in fire, a baptism in fire, or whatever. I don't know. But I also learned how to buy green coffee. I started making my first relationships with people in the coffee industry. I went to my first SCA Expo in 2008, and I learned a lot. So that was my first gig.
Okay, so I gotta unpack that a little bit. So those first steps, because I think this is the hardest part, right? Is getting that first job in roasting, or finding that mentor or person to sort of bring you along the way. Did you go into classes first, like roasting classes first, or did you actually just step up next to somebody, lock arms with that roaster, and they sort of taught you everything they knew because that was their job to train you? What was which direction was it? What came first?
Yeah, Unlike, okay, so like any given company could have, anywhere between like 10 to, even 100 baristas or more, and
Mm-hmm.
so getting a job as a barista is relatively easier because there's more opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
there's more jobs available. But
Mm-hmm.
every roasting company usually only has one or two roasters.
Mm-hmm.
And so, really, the hardest part about finding a job as a roaster is access, because there just really aren't that many jobs available. So, most people, and I would say more than 50% of people who probably start a roasting career basically are owner roasters, like they
Okay.
start their own companies. And then
Right.
that gives them that access. So they don't have any special magic powers of being an amazing roaster, but they did have the special magic power of, getting access to a machine, which is the
Mm-hmm.
hardest part. Um,
Right, because they're
so
expensive, right? I mean, they're
they're so
expensive, and
expensive. And that's
yeah.
why I ended up, kind of giving up and then serendipitously, like this job for like a roaster apprentice. And the woman who hired me, her name was Donna Maskell, and she didn't even really like coffee. She loved tea. She was from Santa Cruz. She's like this deadhead hippie. She was so cool. And she almost didn't hire me because I was a Gemini and she's a Pisces or something. I don't know. I didn't even know what that means. But like, she was like, well, I guess, you said your favorite coffee was a Nicaraguan peaberry. And so I had to hire you. And like,
Thank God
anyhow,
you answered that question that way.
I know, right? Because, like, I guess everyone else, when they said your favorite coffee, they said mocha or I don't drink coffee. So, yeah, anyhow, so she hired me. And although she didn't, like, know a lot about roasting or about even, like, the specialty coffee world, she was always incredibly supportive. She
Mm-hmm.
would buy books. I mean, there really weren't any books, but any books that did exist, she would buy them. And
Mm-hmm.
I was working, like, part-time and barely scraping by, and she would let me sit for like an hour or two after my roasting shifts and bagging all the coffee and just read and like learn. She was really incredibly supportive. She'd let me just practice cupping all the time. um, and then unfortunately she got incredibly sick and she ended up dying of
Mm-hmm.
pancreatic cancer.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was awful. It was about a year and a half into my work with her. So after she had passed, I sort of took over the roasting department, which is me and maybe one other
Mm-hmm.
person. Huge
Yeah.
department. um, so but and then I really learned like all the things that she had known, like
Mm-hmm.
what the sea market, buying coffee, making relationships, all that
Right.
stuff. So I got
Right.
to
Sure.
really cut my teeth there pretty hardcore.
Would you say that she was your mentor basically along the way? And did you have any other mentors that sort of helped you forge a path in roasting?
I don't know if I had so many like mentors. I mean, I think if Donna was my mentor, Donna taught me to be ferocious and settle for nothing less than what I need, you know? And so I wouldn't say that, Donna was necessarily like a mentor in like coffee or coffee knowledge, but
Right.
when it comes to just being like a ferocious woman in business who needs to be loud enough to demand what you need and what you want, like Donna was
Mm-hmm.
definitely that mentor for me.
Jen, did you start She's the Roaster?
I did. Yeah. So let's see. So she's the roaster. Started probably like six years ago, I want to say. It came out of a need where, so I was working on the Roasters Guild Council, and at that moment, I was taking over the competitions committee, and we did our competition, and they wanted like an opportunity where in order to basically be in the competition, it was at Expo at the big trade event. They wanted all, you had to be there. And so they called all the contestants on the stage, and so there's like 40 roasters, not a single woman, not one, not one. And and like I know so many women roasters. I know so many. And like here in the Bay Area, we did like a women's roaster. We did a panel of women's roasters, and there were 6 of us up there, and not even, and there were still more women roasters in the audience. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so it was just sort of like, why aren't women competing, and so I
Yeah.
kind of just like called up a couple of my friends. I mean, I didn't do it because I was a judge, so I called up
Hmm.
a couple friends and I'm like, why didn't you compete, what's going on, and she's like, well, I'm still learning. And I'm like, what do you mean you're learning? You're like, you've been doing this for 3 years, you've been roasting for
Hmm.
3 years, you work for one of the most respected coffee roasting companies in the Bay Area, you're
Hmm.
their head roaster, like
Yeah.
you should definitely be competing, if like you
Hmm.
shouldn't, or if you don't want to compete, it shouldn't be because you're not qualified or you don't have enough experience.
Hmm.
So what I realized is that women are just, we're constantly like, and it happens too when you try and like, hire people, like, you'll put a job description out, there'll be 10 things on it, and men will apply having only 3 qualifications and not 7,
Hmm.
and a woman won't apply because they only have 9 of the qualifications but not one,
Hmm.
and it's just completely opposite. And so that's what I realized the problem was. And so I wanted to do a hashtag campaign that highlighted the fact that not only do women roast coffee, they're already roasting your coffee at
Hmm.
probably some of your favorite roasting companies, you
Hmm.
know. So she's the roaster was a hashtag. We started. I went to a lot of like. I realized that women wouldn't promote themselves because I also don't do that. So it was easier if I said, I need you to promote somebody else, And so we did the first hashtags were, us doing pictures of some of our friends that were roasters and then writing like a little story about them, about how badass they are and who they work
Yeah.
for and how amazing they are. And so that's kind of how She's the Roaster started. That is exactly how She's the Roaster started. And then it
Yeah.
turned into, we started doing some scholarships. The goal was to find more women who, to try and help more women become roasters, but then also to try and advance more women into becoming seen as experts in roasting.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's fabulous. You have an amazing following with She's the Roaster. And one thing you just said is typical not only in coffee and roasting, but across, I'll say, across all industries.
Mm-hmm.
You reference about even applying for a job and seeing the qualifications that are needed, and um, women not applying because they don't meet them. If I don't know if you've ever read it, but there's an article in the Atlantic from 2014 that is
Mm-hmm.
called "The Confidence Gap," and it is probably one of the best articles that I read that just sort of made you, even though we all sort of know this, it just opened it. They articulated it so well. It just sort
Mm-hmm.
of opened your eyes to this, and it immediately made me sit up and go, "What can I do about this?" And it was,
Absolutely.
yeah, and it is about making change, ensuring that on a day-to-day basis, you leading the company, you're making those kinds of choices and helping women lift their head up and
Mm-hmm.
basically, put themselves forward with or without those qualifications. It really almost doesn't matter that you check all those boxes. You don't need to.
Yeah.
It really comes down to confidence, right? So what were some of the learnings from working for other roasters or, other companies that you brought into building Mother Tongue?
Oh, sure. Um, let's see. So I ended up moving back to California. I had a baby. I needed to be around family, and there was this great job working for Intelligentsia. So I got hired to be a, what was it? It was a roaster and quality control specialist, which basically meant we
Hmm.
roasted and cupped coffee all the time.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that was wonderful. Intelligentsia really gave me that education. I On top of that, I really learned how to roast coffee while there.
Hmm.
I'd say with McMenamins, I learned how to fix a lot of machines on my own, like how to just make it work. But
Hmm.
with Intelligentsia, there were 3 roasting operations. So there was one in Northern California, one in LA, and then the one in Chicago. And each one of us had a team. So there were 3 of us roasting at that time in Santa Rosa before we moved to San Francisco. There were 3 roasters in LA and probably more like 5 roasters in Chicago.
Okay.
And once a week, we would all roast the same coffee, and we had this like coffee exchange where we'd all send each other samples. We'd all cup it and score it, and then there was like the winner of the week or whatever, who roasted that, Nicaraguan blender the best, or whatever new amazing coffee that we had.
Yeah.
So, but what was really the best about that wasn't really like who won, but it was tasting somebody else's roast and being like, wow, you got this really juicy tangerine flavor from this, and I haven't been able to get that. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's hard because, like maybe they're roasting on we're all roasting on different machines. So,
Okay.
it's not like an easy recipe. It's not like, oh, turn the oven to 450.
Right.
It's like, well, this is how it works on a Got Hot, or this is how it works on an Ideal Rapid, and now I got to try and make it work on a UG22, or and so a lot of trial and error, which is great. I mean, it was like going to school. It was awesome,
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was interesting for me because again, I'm new to coffee. Literally just been in it for just over a year, but learning everything I can, reading everything I can, but going to Roasters Guild and talking to other roasters that have been roasting for a very long time, talking about them creating their blends, and they brought up the point that it is the one place in coffee that people start to close up a little bit. Like they'll give you some tidbits, but they're not going to give you the full recipe kind of thing in a sense.
Yeah.
But the rest of the coffee industry, you ask them any other question, they'll literally like practically open their books to you, right? I mean,
Sure.
it's amazing. But the roasting, back to that point, the roasting piece of it, just learning the different aspects of what you can do, like even adding moisture back into the beans or something like that if you're blending. I mean, there were things that I learned that I like had no idea, just no idea. Was there something like that in the process that you learned from some of these other roasters that you worked for that you're like, oh, an aha moment about actual roasting?
The biggest oh gosh, I'm going to sound like such a grump, but here it comes. The biggest aha moment in roasting for me is everyone is doing their best. Not everybody knows exactly what they're talking about. So all advice that you get, you should just take with a grain of salt. And I think that when somebody gives you advice, they honestly think it's true. But when it really comes down to it, like they didn't study thermodynamics.
Yeah.
They don't actually know what's going on inside the coffee bean, And like there are things that you can control with your machine. People can roast great coffee on any machine, It's interesting, that you talk about how like secretive it is, and how people really like guard their recipes. Half of that, okay. One, when I worked at Blue Bottle, we all had UG22. So I worked at Blue Bottle's like Oakland operation, which is their biggest one. And then there was one in New York, and then there was one in LA, and then there was one in Tokyo. And so in the US, we all roasted on UG22s, but they were all vintage. They were all like a little slightly different like places. We didn't have the humidity that like New York had to deal with, different probe placement, different sensitivity on the probes. I mean, our goal was to share as much information as possible, to be as similar as possible, so that way our customers would experience our blend in California. Then when they go to New York, it tastes exactly the same. And it is hard. It is hard to make it exactly the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then having to communicate in Tokyo how to try and like also make that the same, like also make it the same. And they're roasting on a Loring, which is a completely different machine, right? So like it's actually tough to make things the same, which I think is like so silly that people see so guarded about their recipes. I honestly think that, maybe half of them are thinking that they have some secret knowledge that, nobody else knows. But I think the other half is that they actually don't know what they're doing, so they're just really quiet about it.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Sorry.
So yeah, no, listen, I always appreciate the openness and honesty. So what was the hardest thing about getting your company off the ground, Jen?
Oh God, every part of it, all of it, I mean, I had said earlier that how, the whole goal was for me to have my own company. And like, I think, so, okay, so like, I worked for McMenamins for 5 years, then I worked for Intelli for 3 years, I worked for Blue Bottle for 3 years, and then I also worked for Royal for 3 years, and I did, I was on the Roasters Guild on the council for, I think, like 7 or 8 years, like trying to help people like learn more and everything. And I think the thing that must have gotten in my way the most was imposter syndrome. I thought I had to know everything. And it was while I was at Royal, and part of my job is teaching people how to roast coffee.
Right.
And so I'm teaching people how to roast coffee, and they're starting their business. And they don't know everything, but they're making it work, And I was just thinking, like, I'm like 17 years in, and I still haven't, I still think that I don't know enough to start my own business. Like, what am I waiting for, right? But I mean, on top of that, like, I'm a single mom. I've got 2 kids. I live in the Bay Area, like, so, starting my own business, I started it with all of my own money, which was like $10,000. So which is not enough money to start a business, by the way. So I worked a full-time job. I worked at a shared roasting facility at Pulley Collective in West Oakland. I did that full time. And then I started my business in my off hours, and it was tough. It was hard, and I did that for about 2 years until I could pay myself. And even after I could pay myself, I can't pay myself very much, so it's just kind of like, I don't know. It's really, really hard. And the margins in coffee are small. And if you don't love it, you shouldn't do it. That's like, just like, cooking, a lot of people I think have this idea that being a chef would be fun. And it's not fun unless you really, truly love cooking and feeding people. But like, you gotta really want it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because when you have that love and that passion for it, you're willing to jump out of bed for that every day. I mean, if it's for the money, it might be a different industry you want to look at, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talk about being a mother of 2. Like, does that have anything to do with the name? Like, where'd the name come from, Mother Tongue?
Yeah. Okay. So it doesn't really, but so I just couldn't. I was trying to come up with a name felt like months, and a friend said, they said mother tongue, but they said it in like Latin or something, and I was like, what does that mean? Like, I don't speak Latin, and they're like, oh, it means mother tongue, and I was like, oh, well, I like mother tongue. That makes sense, and I think for me, it's like, there's a little bit of the feminine and the masculine at the same time, like mother's obviously feminine, but it sounds very masculine. And so that was very attractive to me. But mostly, like, it's kind of the feeling of the 2 words together, and how it's like, okay, like a mother should be somebody who stewards you, takes care of you, guides you to the correct things, hopefully. Not everybody has a great mom, I totally know, but that's what it should be, and then tongue is like how we taste everything, how we enjoy food, drinks, everything. And so, for me, the 2 together, even though mother tongue means your first language, for me, it's like, I think it signifies trust that we will always give you delicious things. Delicious stuff. Put in your
I love that. Perfect. It's the perfect marriage of those. Okay, so tell me about your coffee. Like, I can't help but ask about Thirst Trap, for example. Like, tell me a little bit about your coffee.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's see. Most of the coffees that we have here most of our single origins are all, I'd say like 80% of the people that we work with are people that I've known throughout my years of working in coffee. There's a lot of it is not hard to find delicious coffee. I mean, maybe back in the 90s or early 2000s, you had to hunt for high quality coffee, but nowadays it is everywhere. I mean, you could walk down the street and it'll hit you in the face. There's yummy, yummy coffee everywhere. But it's not just about having delicious coffee for us. It's about working with people who are really trying to change people's lives, and so, for us here, like at my roastery and cafe, it's like, everyone that I employ makes, about the same I do. We are like probably more when you add tips, but like, I'm trying for us to be a sustainable place where all of us, can like thrive. And, that's tough in the Bay
Mhm.
Area. So I don't know if that's, it's
Yeah.
an uphill challenge. I feel a little bit like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill. But, in the same breath, I have a lot of people that I've met in the producing countries, that are trying to do the same thing with
Mhm.
growers.
Mhm.
And so I buy coffee from them because, unlike doing some sort of charitable like project, like,
Mhm.
oh, we're going to help them build a daycare, or we're going to help them, I don't know. I don't, whatever it might be that, is like more of like a charitable offering in order to
Mhm.
enrich their lives. What I'm looking for is I'm looking to work with producers or exporters that are just giving them the money. Just give them the money. I'm
Mhm.
I'm a mom. I know how much stuff costs. I don't need anybody to tell me what to spend my money on. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, I know what
Yeah.
my bills are. And
Yeah,
so,
they know best. They know best. Give them the means to be able to
absolutely.
make the changes they need, right? Or to give
Yeah.
them what they, yeah, yeah, what they want to build.
And besides, what does like a 60-year-old woman because like a lot of these women are like 60 years old, especially in
Yeah.
Latin America, they don't need a
Mhm.
daycare, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
that's not helping them, just give them
Yeah.
the money. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So what so let's talk about your well, I have to come back to the question on Thirst Trap because I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
am curious. It looks different than all your other branding. All your other branding is this bright pink and yellow branding, which I want to talk about too. But tell me
Sure.
first about Thirst Trap.
So Thirst Trap was a specific project that we did for the first queer coffee conference here in San Francisco. And it was with our friends who have a cafe and event space in the city. And we wanted to come up with something like really fun for them. And so we decided to call it Thirst Trap. And there's a picture of like, it's like a picture of Grace Jones, and then there's like Medusa stuff. We just really wanted to have fun with it. We actually do a lot of holiday weird stuff too. Like, I'm a big horror movie fanatic, so for like Halloween, we have like, what's his name, Freddy Krueger coming out of a grinder. It's called Grind Time.
I was scrolling your website and looking at all the different coffees that you offered, and again they were all sort of bright pink and yellow, and then all of a sudden I saw Thirst Trap and it was like blue and it had, like you said, Medusa. It was just fun.
Yeah.
But I love that it gives people something to talk about, and it's, I think from a marketing perspective too. That's one of the things you want to do is you want to serve up something people can talk about. But I also think that people talk about when you look at like T-Mobile, right? They are that bright pink. Like, what inspired your bright pink and yellow brand?
Uh, Candy, to be honest.
Okay.
I like, I've been around the block quite a while, and I think for a long time I've been in meetings where coffee companies really wanted to, in order to sell coffee as a luxury product, they kind of like took a lot of inspiration from perfumes, colognes, fashion,
Mm-hmm.
like high
Mm-hmm.
end stuff. And I get that, like, what is a luxury product, and this is kind of how it is. So like a lot of things are very like black and white. I think that with my branding, I was like, you know what? Let's just be fun.
Yeah.
Let's be fun and delicious and yummy. And also like, I don't know, like candy is very eye catching, and when you look at the candy shelf, like,
Yeah.
specifically, like I think I was thinking of Starburst candies, like those
Mm-hmm.
colors.
Yeah. Sure.
Those
Yeah,
are kind
that's
of like,
fun.
they're kind of my favorite colors anyway. So I just wanted to be really bright and loud. I wanted to pop up off the shelf. I wanted to look fun and exciting. I wanted to like, I just wanted to be accessible. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. So then I want to switch this over to values for a second. So what values do you represent to both your retail and wholesale customers then?
Yeah. Well, I think that what we're trying to do here is, in a way, this company is a giant experiment. Um, can a coffee company exist without profiting off of someone else's back? And the supply
Mm-hmm.
chain is long in coffee.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, and no one is by any means perfect,
Mm-hmm. Right.
But can a roasting company survive paying what coffee needs? You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's,
Right.
that there's the idea of the C market and how much coffee costs. There's the idea of how much customers perceive as the value of coffee and what they want to pay,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand all that, which makes coffee incredibly complicated, but can I pay my suppliers what they need to make to not just sustain their business, but grow their business? And
Right.
can I pay those amounts and also charge what I need to charge in order to not just sustain my business, but grow my business? Like
Mm-hmm.
at what point can I grow my business enough to where I could maybe invest in my employees? They want to start their own coffee shop or
Mm-hmm.
So, like, is it possible? Is it
Yeah.
possible?
Right.
Mm.
Well, so and I think that's it. I think that is something that certainly the customer can attach to and understand. But I don't feel like there's enough real true education out there. It's just the stamp of certification here or there, and the certification, that's a whole other discussion for another time.
Sure.
But it's something that helping customers understand that, and that is, I think, is really important. So finding different ways to be able to do that is always valued. And same with wholesale customers. I mean, the same sort of concept. And some of those larger organizations will actually state what their purpose is or what their standards are. And it's I feel like it's getting better. I just think there needs to be more education around that throughout the whole value chain. So you recently expanded from roasting, and you added a full service cafe. Now, that's a big leap in and of itself. But you also have a liquor license, which I think adds
Yeah.
another layer of complexity. So
Yeah.
why add liquor?
Well, it wasn't my choice to add liquor. There is this really great space, and our friends had it before, and they were, closing their shop. And I was like, I think that would make a really great, cafe. And so I was talking with them, and so it was, we weren't buying their business. We were doing like a turnkey where you buy their assets and then
Okay.
take over
Sure.
the lease. And one of
Mm-hmm.
their assets that they were selling was the liquor license, and they really wanted to sell it. And so I was like, I don't know anything about running a bar. I mean, even drinking at bars, like I'll have like a nice mezcal and like a cheap beer, but I'm like, I don't know anything about cocktails. So I was like, can we do this? And fortunately we found like a really great consultant that helped us sort of like walk through the process. I
Oh.
know so much more
Mhm.
about cocktails. I know so much about Amaros. I knew nothing about Amaros this time last year, and now I know quite a lot. But it was part of the deal to take the
Mm-hmm.
space. And so
Okay.
uh, it's been interesting. It's actually been very helpful because you have this primarily like morning business and this primarily evening business, but
Mm-hmm.
we make cocktails in the morning and we make a lot of coffee at night. So they're
Ah,
kind of sister
interesting.
businesses.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so then what would you say is fun about it, and maybe not so fun? Maybe not so fun because you have to work like a much longer shift for sure.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, yeah, the not so fun part is definitely like labor costs of being open very. And very late.
Mm-hmm.
But the fun part is that coffee people are nerds and they love learning about coffee. And
Yeah.
now I know that cocktail people are also nerds and they love learning about cocktails. So,
Oh, sure. No, that totally
yeah,
makes sense.
it's mostly
Really
fun.
fun. Well, so talking about just sort of labor in general, given the challenging labor market, right, especially after COVID, and higher costs, how are you structuring the retail business to sort of train and retain these employees?
Right. Well, I'm lucky because a lot of people want to work here. And, I think that we have we have a product that people want to work with. I think also a lot of people like, it's not just that we state our values that like we had mentioned earlier, but like, people believe me, it kind of also goes back to that idea of mother tongue being like an idea of trust. Like there's no certification for that, like you either
Right.
trust that I'm telling you the truth or you don't,
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that a lot, I think also too, because I've done a lot of volunteer work in the coffee community, not just with like the Roasters Guild, but also like with She's the Roaster, and we've done like scholarships and like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
education. I think that people know that when I say what I'm trying to do, like that I mean it. I'm also pretty transparent too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Few folks really want to potentially like open their own cafe one day, and I try and be really transparent and open about the books and about my experience and
Mm-hmm.
how money moves in a business, which is hella crazy.
Yeah.
It's just like all these things, and like I'm just kind of an open book. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that really helps. Plus,
Yeah.
it's a team dynamic here, not a hierarchy. So um, everybody gets paid the same, and you get time to get there, but then basically like if you don't cut it, it's kind of the whole team is being like, hey, you got to step it up, because
Mm-hmm.
we're a team unit here,
Right.
so
Well, and I have to give you kudos because the whole idea that people want to work there, it's because of the culture that you've built. It's because of what you've created there, and that team sort of feel, which is, a lot of companies don't do that, and I think you have created something special. So I think that's awesome. So do you think you'll want to expand locations, or you think it's just too soon to tell?
I don't want to. I think I think that for the next couple of years we'll probably be looking towards expanding our roasting operations and
Yeah.
wholesale.
Yeah.
I think one retail is enough for me to handle,
Yeah.
especially since most of my experience is from back of house.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I don't know. It would have to be what I have learned about retail is location is everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you could have the coolest building with the coolest stuff going on, but if nobody knows where you are, it doesn't matter. And like, but also in the same breath, like, like all of those super high traffic places can be really unaffordable, and
Mm-hmm.
unsustainable, like rents and leases. So you just it's gotta be all the right thing, So anybody wants to open a retail place, make sure every box is ticked, all of them. Yeah.
So, do you think your kids will go into coffee?
Uh, my daughter says maybe she's 7. She just doesn't really know yet.
Yeah.
My son definitely does not want to be in coffee. Um, but who knows? Who knows
You
what
never know.
happens?
It's
Yeah,
early yet. It's early. Okay,
it's early
so
for them.
exactly. All right, so I have a few. I know we're coming up on time here, so I have a few questions that we'll run through pretty quickly. So, do you have a life motto words that you live by?
Yeah, I guess I got that tattooed on me. Um, it's fueled by spite. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, I love that. Awesome.
I mean,
Oh,
I
that's
think like
awesome.
in a way, people tell me I can't do something, it just makes me want to do it more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good characteristic to have, though. I think. Okay, so is there one piece of advice that you'd give to someone who wants to either enter the coffee industry or start their own business?
Yeah. If you want to do it, um, talk to some people, ask them how much money they make. But also, like, if you want to do it, I guess like don't do what I did where I waited forever.
Hmm.
I mean, I do think that there is some success in my business for you know that I can attribute to working for these other companies. And then also when I worked for those other companies, I was able to like do a lot of volunteer work and, learn quite a
Mhm.
lot. But also like, you don't have to go that route. Like you can actually like learn as you go,
Mhm.
and and there's so many more places to actually like take classes, like you had mentioned Roasters Guild Retreat. Like that's an excellent place, not just for the classes but the people that you meet. Like you're gonna roast on a Diedrich IR12. Go make 10 friends that roast on a Diedrich IR12. That way if something happens to your machine, because something will happen,
Mhm.
and if whatever happens, like you have to fix it yourself, because there are no repair people, unless you want to fly someone out. And just
Mhm.
call your 10 friends that also have that machine, and they'll be like, that happened to me 3 months ago, here's what you do.
Yeah.
So um,
That's that's an
yeah.
awesome piece of advice, though. That is. I think you're exactly right. So, can you share a general coffee industry stat that you find interesting or fascinating?
Coffee is a commodity, right? And it's
Hmm.
traded on the C market. And so,
Hmm.
there's this like C market price for coffee, which is pretty low, and that's based that and that's for what's called commercial grade coffee. As the world gets smaller and we get to hear more from producers, which actually
Hmm.
makes me really happy. Like, I think that all coffee people should, consumers too, but we should all be following like the Instagrams of like of producers, of coffee producers. They're there, they are talking. You can just message them, DM them, and ask them questions,
Yeah.
and all of them will tell you that they need $3 a pound minimum to just break even, to just sort of
Yeah.
get out of a cycle of debt. Coffee needs to be a little bit more respectful of that,
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway. Yeah.
No, I agree. I think that that's again, that's an education piece of
Hmm.
people truly understanding, what's behind the cost of a bag of coffee, right? I mean, I just
Absolutely.
don't think most people don't think about it that deeply, and it is something
Yeah.
we need to highlight more. Share a random fascinating fact that most coffee consumers probably don't know.
Okay. So this was one that I get asked about, or I hear people talk about all the time. And like it just needs to be debunked more. But there's this idea, and it probably came from some really lovely person who was just trying to like offer up information. Unfortunately, they offered up the wrong information. But there is this myth that dark roasted coffee has less caffeine than light roasted coffee. And I need to help demystify this. All coffee, roasted coffee, whether it's light or dark, has the same amount of caffeine. Caffeine does not come out of coffee through heat. It comes out of coffee with water, And the longer the coffee dwells in water, the more caffeine will be extracted. So like espresso, 30 seconds, not a lot of caffeine. Filter coffee, 5 minutes. More caffeine is extracted because you have more time it's in water. And then, like cold brew, where it could be like 8 hours, 24 hours, the most amount of caffeine is extracted that way. It's like, but every time I'm always hearing, they're like, oh, there's less caffeine in like dark roasted coffee. And it's completely untrue. And it drives me crazy when I just want everybody to know.
So where did you learn that? Did you take a class? Did you read that? Like where did you actually learn that?
Somebody said it, in probably the 2000s. I don't know where it started, but somebody, and then everybody repeated it. And it just became common knowledge. I mean, I
Yeah.
used to say it, until like until actually because coffee is coffee is not as a mature of an industry as like other industries,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
like at UC Davis, there is a coffee center where they're teaching coffee classes, and they're starting to do like white papers that are based on coffee. But that's
Hmm.
very recent. That's like
Yeah.
5-6 years. That's not
Right.
a long time, and they've been doing it with beer and wine for much much longer. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So, so there's a lot of like pop science in coffee that's still
Yeah.
getting debunked. I mean, I don't think
Got
that
it.
people are really trying to fool people. I think they're trying to like offer up the best information that they think is
Sure.
probably true,
Right.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
there's a lot
totally
of it
makes
out
sense.
there.
Got it. So, okay, so I am going to switch over to the U3 top three, which are very, very brief answers. And there's three of them. So the first one is your favorite brewing method.
It's auto drip.
Okay. And for consumption, your coffee drink of choice, like a black or latte or hot, cold, or origin or wash or something.
Ooh. I drink black coffee. I mostly like washed coffees, but I drink black
Okay.
coffee.
And how many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
For okay, not including quality control, I probably drink 6 mugs of coffee a day.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Because my
It's a
guess
lot.
is your mug is not 6 ounces. I mean, it's probably 12
It's
ounces
11
or,
ounces.
oh, there you go.
Yeah, I drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah, so do I. I'm right there with you, Jen. All right, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And I want to give you an opportunity to share where someone can learn more about you and about Mother Tongue.
You can learn more about us mostly through social media. Like we have one social media on Instagram. We are mother.tongue.coffee, and that's mostly about our roasting business. Or if you want to know more about what we're doing at our cafe bar, it is mothertongue.cafe bar.
That is perfect. Again, thanks so much for joining us. I love to see smart women excel, and you have done so much throughout this whole, I'll say for the industry, you have like set the bar. So thank you for helping us unite the world through coffee.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. And thanks to you, our followers, for joining us at U3 Coffee. We'll see you next time.